there's this very popular test online. It's called the political compass test.
It's become very popular because people are obsessed with themselves. They don't really care about politics or anything. They just want to answer questions about themselves for like 15 or 20 minutes.
And basically, it scans on two separate axes. From left to right on the x-axis, it shows communism and collectivism to neoliberalism and libertarianism on the right. If the scale is correct in any way, I will end up in the right libertarian category. I mean, that's obviously where I am.
You know, I would say somewhere between Gandhi and absolute fascism. I think, Gandhi just because I'm such a holy person, and fascism because I like the costumes, I like the uniforms.
This will be good. As everybody knows, and as Media Matters especially knows, I am a theocratic fascist, a believer in subjugating and oppressing people, especially women and minorities, and anyone else who defies me and my own personal views. So this will be interesting to see how this turns out. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations.
Did Bernie Sanders write this question? What a stupid ass question, seriously.
So right off the bat, we know that this test is just bogus because globalization is not inevitable.
So we know that some leftist clown wrote this because you can't serve transnational corporations instead of humanity.
I'm just going to assume that their premise is wrong and put strongly disagree, because transnational corporations have been a lot more helpful to humanity than top-down government-induced schemes.
Very dumb question, so I am going to agree. I won't strongly agree, but I'll agree.
I guess I'm going to say agree. I'm a big fan of humanity and like it better than transnational corporations, sort of.
Strongly disagree. You know, corporations have wealth. Humanity is largely poor. Poor people, as we know, are not worth as much as rich people. And so, you know, that's science.
Okay, I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. I disagree with that, because what if your country is terrible?
Strongly agree. Now, caveat here is America is never wrong, but even if it was, I would still support it. I mean, we could drop an atomic bomb on Australia, and I would still be on board. I would still say, okay, I'm with my country all the way.
Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Well, obviously, if we're referring to the Sicilians, my swarthy skin would be something. Our ability to knead pasta is a superior quality.
Oh, geez. Strongly agree. Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Listen, first of all, the white race has a few things. It really has three things going for it, as far as I can tell. Number one, it has me. Okay, that's a big thing. Number two, we have cargo shorts, okay, which are very stylish and practical. And number three, we walk quickly in hallways. We're very quick, fast hallway walkers, which I think is a positive trait, you know.
There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Of course that is true. If you're watching Stephen Colbert, you think you're getting information and entertainment, and you're getting neither. So that's very worrying right there.
Disagree. There was always that fusion. We just ignored it until the last 5 minutes when everybody got mad because conservatives were suddenly creating news.
It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. Totally disagree.
No, it's a wonderful reflection on our society that we have so many choices in drinking water. So we can either slum it with the tap water or we can go with the fancy Fiji.
Strongly disagree. I think all water should be bottled and sold. Bottle up the ocean too.
It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. I mean, try that. That's great. I could make a fortune. This is a $50 bill. I'm manipulating it. It's still a $50 bill. So that didn't work. Maybe because they're not manipulating money, maybe because they are actually investing in things and risking their personal fortunes to make a fortune while helping others. Idiots.
All authority should be questioned. Strongly disagree. Authority is authority for a reason. Know your role. Fall in line. You hippie.
All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. So what the hell does that mean? I guess I'm going to disagree with that.
I don't even know what that means. I disagree.
I think that people should marry people who have similar values, but I don't know if by kind they mean ethnicity or race, in which case completely disagree. So it completely depends on what they mean by the question. There's inherent vagary to these questions. And I understand that these questions are designed to elicit responses that are quote-unquote racist, so they can label you conservative for being racist. I understand that's what they're doing here. So knowing what they want, I'm going to go strongly disagree. But the questions are deliberately written in vague fashion to elicit those responses.
Strongly agree. In fact, I find myself saying at least 4 or 5 times a day, we don't want your kind around here. Now get! With the GIT. Always, you got to pronounce it that way when you're telling someone. And in fact, I said that to a Canadian this morning when he tried to get on the elevator with me. And it's not just because of the coronavirus. I would say that regardless if it's a Canadian.
Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Yeah, I guess so. Not a huge fan of corporal punishment, but sometimes you got to do it, I guess.
I don't know. I will agree that, if your kid runs out in the street or something like that, you might want to give them a swat or something. Again, I never did that, but I just terrorize my children. It's natural. I just traumatize them, I'll kill you, you little bit. That way you don't have to hit them. If you just, I'll rip your head off and feed it into your neck. It's not. That's why you see my children, they blink a lot. I don't know what that is.
Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Disagree. I don't really care. I just hate that potheads try to make marijuana legalization like the civil rights struggle of our times. Give me a break, guys. Good grief.
Strongly disagree. All potheads should be tied to a pole in the town square, and so that the townsfolk can come and throw tomatoes at them for 5 days. And while they're throwing the tomatoes, they should say things like, "Here's some munchies for you, you filthy stoner."
People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Oh, be quiet. That's who decides that?
Strongly disagree. I don't know we're calling it the Woodrow Wilson eugenicist there.
Strongly disagree with that. The left, I think, strongly agrees with that. In Iceland last year, there was a headline, they said, Iceland has eradicated Down syndrome. Said, you eradicated it what? Like you came up with a cure for it? And it turned out, no, they just kill all the people who have Down syndrome in the womb.
Strongly agree, but I believe that all people should have to submit applications to the government's reproduction regulation and enforcement division, the RRED, before engaging in any sexual activity. So when I'm in charge, there'll be a whole, we'll figure it out, but there'll be a whole agency of government where, if you want to engage in a sexual act, you fill out a couple forms, you submit it, it'll be reviewed, we'll get back to you in 6 to 8 weeks. We'll try to streamline it as much as possible. But the point is, we can't just let people do what they want.
There are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. Well, again, the way this is phrased is ridiculous. By saying peoples, what they are now implying is that if you say that there is an uncivilized culture, that you are labeling a people, meaning an ethnicity or a race. So the very phraseology of the question is asinine. But if we rephrase the question, and this is the question I'll answer, so now it's clear, there are no savage and civilized cultures. There are only different cultures. Strongly disagree. Obviously, that's not true. There are some cultures that suck. And if you don't believe me, check out the Taliban.
Strongly disagree, because I have eyes. So, you look around, look at so many modern cultures are more savage than tribal cultures.
Strongly disagree. Like I mentioned before, Canadians, a deeply savage and primitive race of people, frankly.
When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I disagree with that. It depends what you're troubled by. That's ridiculous. What if you're troubled by a lump on your, body, or you're troubled by something that needs to be talked about?
Strongly disagree. I find it much more helpful to dwell on your anxieties at all hours of the day, like a real man. Cheerfulness is for women.
What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Disagree, because many successful corporations are looking for government handouts or bailouts.
Strongly disagree with that. Corporations in corporate America is probably the leading leftist institution in the country. They're the ones who go along to get along with anything because all they care about is dollars and cents. So it might be in their interest to embrace some stupid gender theory or something, but certainly not in our interest.
Yeah, I find that's generally a good philosophy of life. What I always say is WWCD. What would corporations do? That's how I decide how I'm going to operate on a day-to-day basis.
Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. In the United States, I'm going to go slightly disagree, but I'm kind of torn on this one. I'm between agree and disagree, honestly.
Well, this question insinuates that it's bad to have our civil liberties excessively curbed, so I'll strongly disagree on that. But, of course, in reality, they are being curbed, and that's a good thing. The best thing to do with a civil liberty is to curb it. Only pot smokers and nudists care about civil liberties.
Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. I strongly disagree with that. You kidding me? You got the government blackmailing you for that weird thing that you do when you close the blinds? I don't think so.
Strongly agree. Okay, you don't want a drone peering through your bedroom window at night? Why is that? You meeting with the Taliban? What are you doing in there?
The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Strongly agree with that. The purpose of criminal justice is justice. A secondary advantage of criminal justice is rehabilitation. A tertiary advantage is deterrence. But the point of it is the justice. It is retributive. It's you commit a crime, you got to get punished for it.
I'm going to say I strongly agree with the caveat that I would have it for less serious crimes also. That would be my go-to for pretty much any crime, honestly, except the ones that I commit.
Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Strongly agree. And the people who create abstract art should be arrested and forced to look at it for the rest of their lives. They should put it in a cell with like little rods and squares and circles that don't mean anything.
Agree. I mean, like, if you give me a blank canvas and tell me that it's art, you're an idiot.
Strongly agree, and I would refer back to the death penalty question for the rest of my answer on that one.
The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. Well, yes, in that they keep the blood moving through our economy, right? They keep things going. Disagree with that. Everybody has a role to play. If you didn't have people to come and fix your toilet, then civilization would collapse in about a week or so. But, of course, when we think about civilization, we think about culture. That's what defines a civilization.
Disagree. Many times the writer and the artist are the font of ideas, but, you know, the market decides all of that. I'm not going to decide who's more important and who's less important, and anybody who tries to on one end or the other end is doing the wrong thing.
Strongly agree. You know, writers are communists. Artists are degenerates. No exceptions.
Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Notice they don't ask the question about fathers, by the way. They only ask the question about mothers. I'm going to say agree, but only because I think that if there were a question that said fathers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers, I would also say agree. Meaning that my first duty is to be a father and to be a husband. Okay, my second duty is to have a job in support of that. So I'm only going to say agree because I hold the exact same thing for men. I understand, again, these questions are designed to elicit the notion that if you're in favor of women who have children putting their children first, it's because you're a sexist. But as I say, if the question were about fathers, I'd give exactly the same answer.
I assume by homemaker, they're not just referring to making sandwiches. I assume by homemaker, they're referring to raising children. And if you're a mother, then you do have a responsibility to raise children. And it's more important, if you have children, than making some widget at a factory. So sure, yeah, I agree with that. Again, poorly phrased. I wouldn't use their phrasing, but you know, this test obviously was written by a lib.
I'm going to say I strongly agree, but of course they shouldn't have careers at all. So I mean, I'm going to agree with the general sentiment. Now, if you can find time for a career after you've cooked me 3 meals a day, ironed all my clothes and everything else, then we can talk. But
astrology accurately explains many things. It explains that people are stupid and will believe anything.
So this one maybe could be unexpected. I think that's possibly true. Like, I'm not someone to totally write off astrology. You know, the Bible tells us not to consult astrologers, not because astrology is totally, completely without any merit or reality. They tell us not to because it's evil and it compromises our free will. So I guess I don't know, does it accurately explain many things? What does astrology do? You mean the things you read in the newspaper, or astrology suggesting that there is some rhythm to the universe? I guess I would have to agree, but I would encourage you, never consult astrologers.
You cannot be moral without being religious. You cannot be moral and make sense without being religious, but you can be moral without being religious because you're listening to the religious guy next to you.
I don't think you can build a fully moral system based on objective morality on pure subjectivism, but you can certainly be moral without being religious. Disagree.
And most people who say they're not religious are very religious. Strongly agree. Some people say they're not religious at all, but actually men can become women because your body has nothing to do with who you really are. That's a religious idea that's called Gnosticism. So their morality, which is a perverted morality, that has a basis in religion.
A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. I agree. But I mean, obviously, if the kid's going to be in a foster home, it's better to have a loving gay couple.
The answer is agree, but it depends on the alternative. I have a sort of hierarchy in terms of adoption. If you're talking about a stable, loving, heterosexual couple versus a stable, loving, same-sex couple, I'll take the heterosexual couple because I don't think that mothers and fathers play the same role. If you're talking about a stable, loving, same-sex couple versus an orphanage where kids are being ignored, then obviously I think that same-sex couples should be able to adopt.
Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Well, you guys already know what I'm saying on this one. I don't even think I have to answer it.
I don't know. I'm really torn on this. On a moral level, obviously I think pornography is one of the great evils in our society. On a legal level, do I think that the government has the capacity to regulate it? If you're talking federally, no. Locally, yes. But I think that's true of a lot of things. So they don't actually make clear where the illegality is coming from. I guess I'll say agree on should be legal for the adult population.
This question ignores federalism, for one. It ignores the wills of local populations. It ignores the type of pornography, some of which is truly obscene, and we would jail people for it on the federal level as recently as 10 or 11 years ago. So I would have to disagree with that. Not strongly disagree, but disagree.
What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly disagree. Remember the drone I mentioned earlier.
I don't know. What's going on in there? Is the guy like smacking the lady around and tying her up and putting cigarettes out on her forehead? Because then I think it is the business of everybody. Some people say you can't legislate morality. All laws legislate morality. So I disagree with that.
No one can feel naturally homosexual. That's ridiculous. People are, but that doesn't make it right. But I think homosexuality is something that happens to people.
Strongly disagree. You can believe that homosexual activity is sinful on a biblical or religious level and still believe that people have natural desires to do things that are biblically sinful. I mean, that happens all the time.
I think people can probably feel naturally homosexual. Now, what you do at that point is probably a question for your religious point of view or your moral or ethical point of view, but
Strongly agree, though in fairness, I'm convinced that all feelings are unnatural and ill-advised.
These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Strongly agree, and if you disagree, it's because I'm not sure you're a sentient human.
strongly agree. I just read a New York City sex guide to surviving the coronavirus pandemic, and it was the filthiest document I've read in probably years. So yeah, it's gone too far. I tweeted it out, and it got so much play they ended up deleting it. So I'm doing my part to turn back the tide of the sexual revolution.
All right, let's see where I stand. It says that I am right libertarian.
Let me see. I was aiming for fascism. The libertarian right. I think I'm probably a little further right.
Let's see where I stand. I am, as I predicted, slightly on the authoritarian right. So I'm almost exactly where I predicted that I would be, despite all of their extremely dumb questions.
Okay, according to this, I am a right-wing authoritarian fascist. How am I not? See, I was shooting for I wanted to get all the way to the top right corner. I wanted to be as authoritarian as possible and as right-wing as possible. I was going all the way for that corner spot, and I missed it. What question did I get? What question did I not answer correctly to get there? So that means I was slightly liberal on a few of those answers. And now I got to do it all over again, I guess, to get the real answer, which I'm not going to make you guys watch.